Welcome to Beauty and the Biz. Discover how to grow your practice with effective cosmetic patient attraction, conversion, and retention advice from author, speaker, trainer, and cosmetic practice business and marketing coach, Catherine Maley, MBA.
Hello, and welcome to Beauty and the Biz, where we talk about the business and marketing side of plastic surgery. I'm your host, Catherine Maley, author of Your Aesthetic Practice, What Your Patients Are Saying, as well as consultant to plastic surgeons to get them more patients and more profit. Now, today's distinguished guest is Dr. Lorne Rosenfield. That is a fancy middle name you have there. He is a board-certified plastic and reconstructive surgeon, and he's been in practice in the same community for over 22 years. As a matter of fact, he's also in the Bay Area, so he's about 30 minutes away, and he lives like a mile from my sister, so it's all very family-like over here. So Dr. Rosenfield is the only private aesthetic surgeon to be active as a professor at both UCSF and Stanford universities. Now, he teaches and he writes scientific papers and book chapters, teaching his innovative techniques to other surgeons. He's been voted best doctors and top doctors in America by his peers, and is a member of the most prestigious organization called the American Association of Plastic Surgeons, where only 3% of plastic surgeons are honored to join. Now, he does zero advertising, and he gets patients the old-fashioned way by earning them one patient at a time. So they refer their friends, family, and colleagues to him. Now, Dr. Rosenfield also founded Peninsula Plastic Surgery Foundation to deliver charity reconstructive care to those in need in his local community. So I want to welcome Dr. Rosenfield to Beauty and the Biz. It's a pleasure to have you. And did I leave anything out?
Yeah, that's an older CV.
Okay.
I know exactly how old it is because I've actually been in practice for 31 years.
Whoa.
So what's different? And this could be this could be an advantage because it tells you, what my learning curve and my path and my advancements have been in the last whatever the years it was. I think you said 23 years, and it's been
22.
Another 8 years. So what's happened in 8 years? Well, as you say, I'm still involved in all the organizations you mentioned, but in addition, I'm now on the board of the American Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery, which is the premier association for aesthetic plastic surgeons in America. I'm also on the board of the Aesthetic Surgery Journal, which is a premier worldwide journal of aesthetic surgery. And now I've just created a byline called Second Thoughts About First Thoughts, which is about how do great surgeons become great.
Nice.
So I'm working on that right now. I've also got a book deal with Oxford Press to write a book with the interviews and data I've collected and collated from master surgeons as to how they got where they are, what are the secrets of the sauce.
Is it a consumer book or is it going to be an industry book for the surgeon?
That's a great question. The first book is going to be for the industry.
Okay.
But ultimately, my goal is with this principle, which could hold across all of society's professions. I would love it to be a consumer book, which will obviously be more expansive and penetrating in the market for good reason. What else? I've got, as I say, a book deal with Oxford Press. And I'm working on a meeting, still am, which you were going to be involved in, which is now going to go Zoom, which is a big advantage because now there's no barriers, no friction. That'll happen in collaboration, with what I was going to mention in my traveling professor lectures I was doing. I became friends with the head of Duke University, and I've now become a professor of Duke.
Whoa.
And I'm going to be helping educate the residents again remotely and on site at both ends. And so he's going to help me with this meeting that we're going to do next fall or early winter. And so, yeah, that's a few of the things that have been going on since the last time I wrote that CV.
Okay. Wow. You have a lot happening over there. So Can we go ahead and have that conversation that's still in the air and is the most prominent, which is COVID-19? How have you handled that, and what are you experiencing?
Yeah. So it's really interesting. So, this question's come up by so many people in terms of, it's the first thing on everybody's mind. Probably in no time, probably in our human history have we all been on the same page literally globally in such a fashion. So it really is, an opportunity to either become an animal in a den and be afraid to go out, or as I like to put it, take advantage of it and turn lemons into lemonade as best you can, especially from a personal and interpersonal and professional in a lot of ways. I mean, I've never had such a large pause. I always talk about the pauses in surgery that we're supposed to do before we operate to make sure you're operating on the right hand or on the right patient. I always say there should be integrally placed pauses in our life to stop and look at what we're doing. Is this the right path? Is this the right direction? With anything that we're working on, or anything we're involved in. Well, COVID definitely gave us a pause. I mean, it's the longest vacation I've ever had, and the longest time I've ever had not operating. So I think it initially was a shock to the system, needless to say, and then slowly, just because I'm an optimistic person who can't sit still, that combination resulted in a lot of great things happening that progressed. All those projects I spoke of all moved forward significantly, and some of them are getting off the ground that I didn't even talk about, that are additional simply because they were on my pile of things to do that I never got to. And we can touch on some of that as we talk about some of the things I do. I'll mention it. But I think that from my point of view, COVID really does establish and prove how little friction there needs to be. There needed to be between myself and my office to telegraph to patients our interest and commitment to safety in our office and operating room. When it comes to reopening, because that was the big issue, is like, what's going to happen when we go back? And as I mentioned, I was part of the small group. There was a committee nationally by AAPS that we wrote the protocol for returning back to practice. And so clearly I was living and breathing this for the last several weeks. But what was not mentioned in that list, of course, of what you need to do to go back, because that's all just practical issues related to cleanliness and wearing masks and so on. It's the je ne sais quoi. It's the smoke and the unquantifiable parts of your practice that come to life when you're stressed like this. I would say it's easy to be good when things are good. It's hard to be good when things are bad. And if you don't have a substrate and a foundation, especially if we speak specifically of a practice, it may not fly. Which is why, just like '08, there'll be practices and entities that will disappear because they didn't have the infrastructure and anything more than an Instagram page, and it won't last. You need substrate. So what does that mean? What I've found is that, this advantage that I've developed over many years has proven its worth. I mean, patients from the get-go have known that this is a safe place to return to practice and to visit our operating room and our consult rooms. And we're definitely seeing it as we have increased numbers coming every day, this in the last couple of weeks now. And that's what it means to build a practice. I think one patient at a time, as you mentioned. It takes 30 years, not a few days on Instagram, but you eventually have a practice that's clearly stronger with a more sturdy foundation, and you can stand taller. And you can say, well, what about the patient who doesn't know me, who's never been to my office? It's easy to say, well, you've got all these patients that think you're wonderful, and they're clearly coming back. Well, what's interesting is that as long as they can get to my website, where they have these sort of details, as I call it, my body of work, my practice philosophy, the differences, as you mentioned earlier, about what I do that may be different than others, then the office will present itself through that website, or of course, ideally, in person. They're going to see that it's real, and the fact is that that's the way you win your patient. And I say win, I mean an honest, legitimate win, not one predicated on just fluff and all deference. I'm going to beat on Instagram, but the fact is that having a lot of followers is not the way. That's not the same as winning a patient with a with a body of work and a reputation. And I think to me, that's really the piece that matters, because if you think about it, I've spent 30 years building my passion for a balance between safety and results. And I think that, as I mentioned, this is what I call, deliberate practice, where one of my heroes is Anders Ericsson, and he was going to come to that meeting, which hopefully will still happen, learning curve, where he proved that 10,000 hours of practice to reach expertise. But it wasn't just practice. As Gladwell originally wrote about it and popularized it, but it was the deliberate practice. You have to install these pauses in your practice that are going to act as change agents to better. So my primary change agent was my surgical techniques, to realize better in my results in terms of aesthetics, and most importantly, in terms of safety. And that brings us full circle, because then, the point is that, as President Bush said, it's all about the economy, stupid. Well, in my case, it's all about safety in the end. In the end, what patients want is they don't want to be harmed. They want to be safely taken care of and come out whole on the other end. When you ask them what their greatest fear is, that always is what it is. Yes, they want something bigger or smaller or removed or added, but the fact is, in the end, it's about safety. And, parenthetically, I always say, when I give my lectures to surgeons about safety, I say, I know you want to, learn what are you going to tell me that's going to make me more money tomorrow. And I always say, that's not the way to think about this. The way to think about this is, if you're safer with better results, you're going to have more patients in the end than anybody will, in a much less frenetic kind of whirlwind way, because it just will happen organically. So that's how you make more money. Just have a better result that's safer.
I will vouch for what you're saying, because my book is sitting right here. I interviewed cosmetic patients, and I said to them, you know how we all talk about price? Oh, it's all price. When it got down to it, the real answer was, yes, I'd love a fair price, but I want to make sure I don't regret this, and I am happy with my result, and I get out of this,
right,
unscathed.
Right. Well, and that's exactly right. And I I was chair of the safety committee for the AAPS for years for our society. I created the first checklist, surgical checklist, comprehensive checklist, that's now the standard nationally and even in the European Union, about how do we prevent errors of omission and commission when it comes to what we do from one end of the patient to the other. As I like to put it, I tell patients, you will be handled like a Fabergé egg from the moment you come into this office till you are discharged. And it's not, as I like to put it, it's not a tagline. I tell patients, this isn't a meme. This is my philosophy. This is our foundational practice philosophy that we will prove to you, and my body work will prove to you, is real. Because you just can't say things. You can, but if it's not with substance, if it's not backed up by both facts and actions, then it's not real. And I think that's, to me, the most important piece. So what happens is, now we come to the time of COVID, and you now understand why it wasn't hard for me to speak to my patients. They immediately knew out the gate, I was all about safety. I'm all about great results. It's not like great results aren't important. As I like to put it, there's a Cirque du Soleil balance. Cirque du Soleil looks beautiful, but it looks incredibly dangerous. But their risks are very low, because they take incredible pains of reducing risk, yet it looks beautiful. That speaks to us as aesthetic surgeons. There's a balance between safety and aesthetics, and you have to struggle with that every day. And the fact is, if your patients already know that, or you can prove it from what you've done, then when it comes to reopening the office, there wasn't any need to explain. I had so many patients say to me, I know if I'm going to go anywhere, I don't have to think about worrying about going here, because I know that it's going to be a safe environment. And so I think, really, when it comes down to it, that to me is the lesson that anyone who's starting out needs to listen to, and anyone else who's struggling with where they should be and what they should do at this moment, is the fact that what matters is all the old-fashioned stuff. It's like that Robert Fulghum book on everything I ever learned, I learned in kindergarten. Right. This is not brain surgery. It's all the stuff that, as I like to put it, that since the beginning of time, with physicians, it's about taking care of patients better. It's about caring about them more. It's about being keeping your eye on the ball about the right things. You want to get a great result. You want to get a better result. You got to hone your skills, and you need to be safety conscious at all times. And that takes deliberate effort. And that, to me, is the message that came out of this, is that I proved that point right there by COVID saying, pause, patient, and then the patient said, but I'm not pausing to come to his office. I'm ready to have him take care of me. Yeah, so I think that's really the big message.
To put it in a pragmatic way, are you going to go over some of the checklists you do? Because you're talking about safety, but how pragmatically, what does that mean in real life?
You know, that's an interesting point, and I think that it's kind of got its dual edge, because on the one hand, for patients that know me and have been in my practice for a long time, they just know whatever I'm doing is the ultimately safest way anything can be done, and they don't have to think about it. From the practical point of view, it's what everything else you've ever heard about. I mean, you need to be sure that you abide by the 3 or 4 main tenets of COVID. I mean, for example, masks, N95s. Initially, I thought, well, I read what's going on in the hospitals. They're in short supply. I busted my rear end and I got enough of them. It wasn't easy. I practically had to sell one of my children, but I've got enough. And to start, and I thought, well, all the people in the OR are having direct close contact with patients should have the N95. Then before we started, I said, wait a minute, everybody should have one. Mm-hmm. Clearly, that's a better scenario. If I'm wearing one and my staff's wearing one, then I decided, wait a minute, my patient should be wearing one, because clearly that's even better. Then it eliminates as much as possible any fear by anybody, because fear is a big factor here, and you need to be able to telegraph that this is a safe place and you don't have to be afraid. Or as much afraid. And so everybody gets a mask. We obviously have protocol the way you hear about, organizing patients coming in one at a time, and a very strict pattern in and out, and spending only the time we want to spend with them, which is hard for me because I like to schmooze and talk to patients, which is one of the hardest things to do, and hug them. But be that as it may, my staff is on maintaining a rotation. We don't just clean everything down on our own. We clean things down with the patient seeing that we're cleaning things down. Mm-hmm. It's just like when you go to a hotel and you see the bathroom with little tickets that say cleaned by somebody, and with a piece of paper or something. It's there for a reason. If it wasn't there, it's the same outcome. Mm-hmm. Been cleaned, but when you have demonstrable evidence, better yet, that you see them cleaning. If you've ever watched or read about the Japanese trains, where they would have a team go in, they'd black out the windows, and they would have them all clean the train in like 3 minutes. There'd be an army go in there, and you couldn't see what's going on. There'd be a 3-minute wait. And the public, even though they know it's good they're being cleaned, but they would be frustrated and anxious and impatient. They then decided, the chief said, let's take down the window covers. Let's let them watch. Mm-hmm. They all watched what was going on, and you know what started to happen? It became an event. People came just to watch that, not to get on the train. They were marveling at how good they were, how efficient they were, and they would clap when they came out. They would give them kudos. That's what we need to do with COVID. We need to demonstrably show our patients that we are concerned about this, not just in terms of, saying it. It's just like everything else I just said earlier. It has to be in action. They see it. They see us cleaning down one end or the other all the time. My staff are instructed to do that, so everybody sees that that's going on. Beyond that, we're doing the testing that you have to do. I think that is mandatory in advance of surgery, and they shelter in place. People say, well, how are you going to keep them to shelter in place? All I do is the same way I say to patients that smoke, and I tell them to stop smoking. I say, you're an adult, I'm an adult. If you smoke, you're going to lose half your face. It'll turn black and fall off. That's your decision. I'm telling you now not to smoke before surgery. The same way with shelter in place. It's your choice. You don't shelter in place, you can get very sick. So it's very simple. Stay home and don't go out. So with all those maneuvers, that is the way we're dealing with the demonstrable presentation of it. And clearly we have checklists to make sure my staff is doing that. You mentioned that. I mean, we have We have a comprehensive checklist that every staff member follows. It's color coded by the staff member. They all pick their color. Mm-hmm. And then it's impossible for anybody to not do what's necessary because it stands out. The box is not checked. I have nothing to do with it. You're always worried. I don't want to do any more work on paper. You don't. The staff does it. They look better. His outcomes are better. I'm happier, and everything is definitely moves forward. And so we do that with everything we have. We have some protocol. We think of a new person comes in. You have a floater nurse coming in. She doesn't know my office. All she has to do is look at that checklist and see what the protocols are and follow it. It's impossible for her to do the wrong thing of what is most important ever, because I believe it's fully system failures. It's not human failures, it's system failures is what causes most of the problems in the operating room and in care pre or post op.
I'll tell you what, this is such a pearl, and I hope the audience is catching this. That is your branding. The way you're branding is you're not just saying we're great, you're actually proving how great you are in the details. And that, I hope that's the point. How are you different from somebody else? You have a color-coded system, protocols, checklists. Everyone's like a Swiss Army knife. A consumer patient can feel that a mile away. You know when someone's on their game and when they're just winging it. And that's why you have that feeling of safety when you're with your practice. That is absolutely priceless, and I hope people are hearing what you're saying.
It's funny you should say that. So a few months ago, when I was in practice the first time, I had a patient come in who I had done a rhinoplasty on, and she had a small irregularity on the dorsum of her nose. And she said, I have to tell you I cheated on you. And I said, what do you mean? She says, I went to see another doctor to have him look at the result. And I said, that I would have given you names of people. I'm not shy to have you go see other people and see what they think. I'm the first person to say, go out there. If there's good ideas, get them. She said, well, I ended up seeing this guy. And I said, what happened? He says, well, it was really interesting. She says, he looked at my nose and he examined me and he thought about it. And he said, well, who did your surgery? And she says, Dr. Rosenfield. And he went, well, then I'm done.
Yeah.
She said, what do you mean you're done? Because he's Mr. Safety. He's going to give you the best result you can, and then not a minute more. So I'm not touching you. There's nothing more to do here. And I remember when she told me that, I said, oh my God, that took 30 years to hear that.
Right.
And that to me is the brand. That is the one you want, because that is real, it's foundational, it's indelible, it's everything. It's harder, not the easy route. I always say to young plastic surgeons that you have two paths to go down. And I know, we can talk about, marketing and social media, and I think there is a place, but I'm a firm believer, regardless of what new methods there are to get the word out, in the end, your eye has to be on one ball. You need to be better than the next guy, technically. That's just the bottom line. And I would say, and you may not agree with me, but there's an inverse correlation that the more technically adept and with results to prove it, in terms of a better result with fewer complications, that surgeon is, the less they're marketing. The less they're on social media. I'm actually working on a paper with that regard with a Stanford resident. I'm absolutely convinced that it's a zero-sum game, if you get my drift, between the two. And I think if you look at, I know things are changing, and I know that I'm not meaning to sound like I'm old, but in the end, my final point is, as I tell young plastic surgeons, you only have so many minutes in the day, so many ticks in your practice. If you spend it all on promoting yourself on Instagram, or you spend it on getting better at what you do in the operating room, they're relatively mutually exclusive. You only have so many minutes in the day. And the fact is that I've seen it over and over again. If you get completely consumed by the latter, you're going to kind of burn out or at least be kind of on that curve. You're going to flatten and plateau. That's as good as you're going to get. And now you have to make up for it with a lot of other less foundational, more ethereal and kind of anxiety producing phenomenon, which is true full-on marketing. So you got to get good at what you do. Doesn't mean that's the only way, but personally, as you said earlier, there's a lot of ways. That to me is the way it's been since Halstead and Mayo and any other surgeon that was better. He was busy trying to get better. It's a lot of work. Honing this skill, 10,000 hours, you have to do it multiple times, over and over. It takes a lot of time. That's my secret.
So that's where I have a little struggle, because that takes a lot of patience to get that kind of practice. So there's some balance there of, in today's world, you have to market yourself. I mean, you don't have, let's back up. When you first got into practice, did you do what everybody else did? Did you get into the yellow pages? And like, how did you do it?
In my talks, I have a picture of my yellow pages ad, and I bolded it a little bit because it cost too much to bold it too much.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to square.
Those were not cheap ads. They were like tens of thousands of dollars a month or something. They were
and that was about it.
Okay.
There wasn't a lot. Well, there was television and radio ads that you could have done. And I actually did dabble in that a little bit and found that I would have like 100-to-1 ratio. 100 people would call, 10 people would come in, and I might operate on one of them. Yeah. That's an exhausting practice. And you could say, well, that's one route, and it gets you patients, and it does. But when I have 10 patients come in, 9 of them I operate on. And so there are 2 routes. I would just say that one is it has advantages that the other doesn't have. And there's no way that you can get what I'm just described by the other route. There's way too much winnowing, and there's way too much random shopping. So I understand that's the route. And you can say, well, how's a new person going to get started?
Yeah.
How he gets started? He does it the old-fashioned way. He goes and joins practice. He joins hospitals. He gets on the air calls. He goes out and speaks all over the place. He gets himself known in the community. He volunteers. He writes papers. He lectures. He gets on committees. He gets himself a foundational body of work and reputation. And the key word, Catherine, is it takes time.
How long?
It takes years and years, a minimum of probably 10 years for you to be able to get that threshold in what I call escape velocity. Whereas when you go on, if you just decide day one, July 1st, I'm going to be an aesthetic surgeon, as I like to call it, you're fooling Mother Nature. I train these guys. They're not ready to do a facelift on July 1st. I don't care who they are. There's no way that would be really, truly the metric you should be following. But I understand the forces of the market mandate that you just suddenly say, I'm ready to go. That's true. If you don't want to do anything else you were trained to do, you're trained to do everything else in reconstructive surgery. And so now you're letting that all be thrown away, and you're saying July 1st, I'm doing aesthetic surgery. And the fact that if you do that, then yes, you're right. You need to do everything you described. But if you don't do that and you say, I'm going to build my skills, I'm going to, so to speak, make mistakes where it doesn't matter as much. When someone comes in with a finger on ice and it doesn't take, they brought it in on ice. Right. But when someone comes in like you for a facelift, they're starting from perfect with there's nothing that's at issue, and you better make them better. You better not fail. So the room for error is practically zero. So with all that said, those are the reasons. When I first started, I was at 12 emergency rooms, 12 hospitals. I ran all over. I gave lectures. I started getting involved with the societies. I made myself known to all the doctors. I took care of every single laceration that could possibly come in. And now I have those mothers coming in for surgery. And I'm having the kids come in for surgery. I've gotten so old. And so those are from the lacerations. I did thousands of them. Mm-hmm. So was it easier to not get out of bed or not go there and do that? Yeah, it would have been. But that foundational base does not happen if you just go straight past go. And I know that there's a lot of argument against that, but I got plenty of surgeons that have followed my advice, and 10 years out, they're not turning around and watching what's going on around them and worried, what's this guy doing now? Oh my God, he's got more followers than I do. I need to put out another post. When I go to meetings now, Catherine, half the time, half the speakers on the panels are busy taking pictures because they got to post it. And I look at that and I go, oh my God, what about the content of your lecture? What about, have you published anything? One of the things I want you to do next time, I want you to go on PubMed and I want you to look at when they wrote a paper last.
Mm.
That to me is what you should do for every single surgeon and doctor you ever see. Are they publishing? Are they writing? Are they presenting? Because if you're not, the 10,000 hours clock left them 10 years ago.
Well, let me ask you this, because I do think this is also generational. You have more patience than Job, and the others have zero. You know, a lot of the younger people have been told, "Oh no, you should be up and running within a year," rather than I grew up on 10 years. It took 10 years to build a practice. Now it's about a year because they have a lot of bills to pay and all of that. But here's the caveat to that. It's also the consumer. In a facelift patient will care a lot about you being involved at Stanford, writing, speaking, lecturing. The breast dog 20-year-old patient really does care that you're on Instagram. So how are you addressing that?
Right. Well, the first thing is, remember that when you talk about, I started that way. So I didn't have Instagram, and I didn't have Facebook. So I didn't have any patience. I didn't. But you have to work really hard, and I didn't just do aesthetic surgery. But if we use the model of, I'm not going to do reconstructive at all, and I'm just going to do aesthetic surgery, then you're right. Well, it's what I call fooling Mother Nature. It's very difficult to fool Mother Nature. She's going to bite you back. So you're going to have the struggles that I see happen when you do that, because you're going to say things that you don't really mean. You're going to present yourself as something you really aren't. I mean, let's be honest. That's honest. July 1st, come on. So if we start there, it's really a conversation non-starter. There's nothing more to say. But if we try to move forward, then yes, you're right. Then that's the only way that they're going to build their practice, because they're not going to have another way to do it. As far as the demographics, there's some truth to that. The face of patient's unlikely to go to an Instagram doctor, but that's not always true. There are statistics to prove, which I don't believe, which I'm going to refute by my research, that like a third of all patients or half of all patients are coming through Instagram. I don't believe that.
I don't believe that. Yeah.
I don't believe it. But there are patients that are making bad decisions based upon an Instagram page, because that's a bad decision. I mean, I don't care who you are, how good you are. That's a bad way to pick a doctor. It's a curated, potentially manipulated presentation that's unvetted, unpeer reviewed. It's just the Wild West. And that's just what it is. I can tell you what I'm going to maybe do, but the fact is, maybe I shouldn't, because I don't want anyone else to do it. But the point is, on social media, but the point is that for those patients, you're right. Face-to patients more likely not to go there. The younger patient, the one that's looking for a deal, is likely to go there. You know what the difference is? Excuse me. You know what the difference is? Really none. I don't get those patients now. And I wouldn't get them if I was on Instagram. You know why? I charge too much. Okay. I don't augment them to the number that they want, because they will say, this is what I want. See this? I want 620 cc's. That's what my sister got. I want that. And the doctor will go ahead, because it becomes a retail transaction.
Right.
And so I wouldn't win in that anyway. And I wouldn't win then, and I don't win now. It makes no difference if there's Instagram or not. That demographic would not come to me. And so I don't think I'm missing anything, and I don't think they're missing anything, because they wouldn't come to me before there was Instagram. The patients that I think are fascinating are the ones that are really would like another way, and a more voluptuous way to learn about a doctor. And they go to Instagram or some other media site, and they'd have me. They'd find me. Because I'll tell you my philosophy at this moment as I think about it. Because I've had lots of doctors tell me, younger guys say, you really need to do it. You need to get on social media. And it's fascinating, because I thought about it and said, you know what? There's some truth to this. Because when I first started, which speaks to what I just said earlier, when I first started, what the heck was I advertising? What was I going to put on in 1987? What could I put on Instagram?
Right.
Nothing. I had no patience. If I put any pictures, they weren't going to be mine, which already starts on a bad premise. But whatever I said wouldn't be real. But the fact is that I didn't have anything to start with, and I think that I lost my train of thought. The fact is that discrepancy of when you didn't have anything to really go on to market, I wouldn't know what to do with it. But now, ironically, at this point in my career, I'm perfect for social media because I have a foundation of work. I've got a reputation. I've got results. They're mine. I've got lots of them. I have great statistics. I've got lots to share. I've got lots of reasons to say this is a place to come. So now, ironically, I should be involved in social media. The secret is, and maybe you'll help me offline, the trick is, how do I distinguish myself, which you know is a big piece of the way I think, from all the thousands of other voices of people that I don't want to get into bed with personally, because it's the whole gamut. And I don't want to become partners with everybody that's in that room.
But on the other hand, look at the consumer point of view. They're online searching for the best fit for them. They want to know that you're more than just a surgeon. They're trying to connect with you, and that's where social media has taken over and gone way too far in it. But they're looking for you as, who are you as a person, as a father, as a husband, as a sports nut? Like, who are you? And that's why this has all gotten convoluted, because I will tell you, there are very many okay surgeons making a killing with sheer volume of marketing and patients, and their results are good enough. They're not perfect, they're good enough. So, and they can beat you. They can win, not you, but they can win over a really good surgeon. A really good marketer can win over a really good surgeon, at least in the short term.
Well, so there's so much loaded in that statement. Number one, what does winning mean?
Money.
What does winning really mean? If it means money, great. Well, we know it's as old as the hills that you don't want that to be the reason when you're on your deathbed that you won. Because I can tell you that speaks for itself right there in volumes. You don't want that to be your measure. Because if that's all it is, then you might as well, there are a lot of other ways to make money in the same fashion, which I would call just wanton advertising, 1,000 other ways to do that. Let's bring some nobility back to our profession. It shouldn't be just about making money. It's about so much more than that. And the fact is, you said it as well. I love when you said their results are just okay. They're just okay. They're adequate. They're at the standard of care. Oh my God, that's just like an anathema to me. That's where I would be, because that's just, who would want to be there? Because in the end, you've got to rationalize that that's okay. But even beyond that, I'd love there to be a study to look at malpractice suits, to look at the hassles that go on in the office. What's the energy that has to go into unhappy patients? What are the energies that go into the repeat surgeries and the revisions that go on? When you're in that state of surgery, there's a lot of hassling that goes on behind the scenes. You may be making a lot of money, but there's so much that goes on behind the scenes that is personally miserable and an anathema to me to imagine practicing like that. So yes, you're right. They can make more money than I can, and they will. Good luck to them, because I would never want to be in that scenario on that treadmill doing that ever. Can you do both? I'm going to prove that you can on some level at this point in my career. I don't think it would have been honestly possible from an ethical point of view at the beginning, because it doesn't make sense to me that I could promote myself with nothing to promote. I have nothing to promote. So I get that it works. Look, advertising works. We know that. We don't need plastic surgeons to prove it to me or you. It works. The question is that still right? Is that the way we should be spending our energies? Or should we be going and seeing other surgeons and how they do things? Should we be studying the work we're doing ourselves? Should we be going to meetings? Should we be, collecting our own data? Should we be speaking, putting our thoughts together, figuring out what works better? I mean, there's so much to do in the way of honing your craft that's just distracting, as I said at the beginning. So I think there's balance there.
Right.
I look at it, as one surgeon said to me, visited me from Australia, he says, you're already marketing. You're writing your stuff. You tell me you're on the board. You're presenting. You're marketing. And that's true. It is a form of marketing. It has that added advantage. As I like to put it, if a patient comes in to see me, let's say even from Instagram, let's say I had an Instagram page and they come to me, or not, which would be the other scenario, Well, why should I have you do my tummy tuck? Well, my staff will have the chapter I wrote in the definitive text on abdominoplasty.
Mhm.
And I'm not bragging. I'm just saying I work like a dog to create that. I remember my kids were small. They said, Dad, when's that bloody chapter done? Because I want to see you back. You know what it's like to write a book. The fact is,
Oh.
that patient has a choice. There's no more choice anymore. That is $100,000 worth of advertising a month. That work is $100,000 a month. And that says it all right there. There are two paths, but one on so many levels can be philosophically more noble, more productive, more giving back to the community of surgeons and our profession. That's just, it's not that I'm better. It's just that that is a route that, as I said at the beginning, that's the foundational route that's been the case since day one. I mean, Facebook and Instagram will come and go, but surgeons operating in an operating room, private, or in a consult room in private with a patient, will not change. That is the way it is forever. And so that doesn't matter about all the other pieces. You better treat that patient as the best that you can with the least problems and give them what they want. And that has nothing to do with marketing.
Well, it does. It does in the sense that they're not going to even know you. They're not going to know you exist if you don't somehow get in front of them. You know,
right? And I get it.
Yeah.
It's my $64,000 question that I've asked people like you and others. How do I do that without marrying the other people that I don't want to be with, and with all the noise and a lot of not truthful noise? And so that's the problem we have, as you put it. You admit it. It's gone too far.
Mhm.
And so to get on that train that's going too fast, is that really the right thing to do?
But if you came in with integrity and transparency, and you actually told the consumer what to look for, because if consumers are so not educated about all of this, even when they think they are, they've been online where there's 2-for-1 boobs. It's so tacky now, and it's everything, and they're so confused. So how do you, like, take a consumer? How do you tell them that your abdominoplasty, your tummy tuck is 8,000 more than this other guy? You have to run into that. Like, how are you proving that you're 8,000 worth 8,000 more?
Well, yeah, it's a great question, and I'll tell you what I do. But from my final thought about social media is the following: I'm going to enter into it. I'm going to do them. Some of the people I've talked to are probably going to listen to this and say, it's about time, Lauren, that you did that. And I think that that's okay. Everybody has its moment as to when you're ready. Mm-hmm. I think it's going to be an interesting travel, and I will keep you posted. We'll do another.
I will watch you.
Another Zoom, another day.
Okay.
But I think there are ways of doing it. And maybe it's almost like I needed to wait for this moment where it's gone too far. Mm-hmm. And we have enough data about it, which is always the way I like to do things scientifically. I want enough information to know before I get on this speeding train, or at least something that's going to have a lot of moving parts. So more at 11. Now, as far as your question goes about cost, it's a fascinating one, because I'll tell you what I do. In my consults, I will tell patients that you're paying not just for what should happen, but for what should not happen.
Oh, that's good.
It's like an insurance policy, and it's a good insurance policy. And the fact remains that is a real fact. But then you can say, well, you could just say that. That sounds like a great slogan. And then I go, here, I say, let me give you a little more information about how I think and what I do. When I give you informed consent, the normal informed consent is a long litany of every possible complication that could happen on any patient having any surgery by any surgeon in any location. That's really a useless informed consent, because it covers the surgeon's rear end. It does nothing for the patient. You're signing that anything could happen. You could turn into a rabbit on Tuesdays between 2 and 4, and you're signing it. So instead, I say to the patient, I'm going to give you what complications, what problems I've had on my patients, operating on a patient just like you, doing the surgery that I'm going to do, my techniques, in my office operating room. And I'll tell you what they are over the last couple of years. I'll give you those facts. And by the way, Catherine, I do the same thing in my presentation, which is rarely done. I'm going to tell you what went wrong and how often it's gone wrong. And you could say, Well, no one's going to do that. And you're right, no one will, but I will. Then you could say, well, others are just going to make it up, and they're going to say that no, I don't have any problem. And it's interesting because either one of those is possible, but I can tell you patients are intuitive. I've had that happen where a patient went off to see another person, and I say to the patient, when you go see other doctors, ask them that question. If you go to an orthopedic surgeon for your knee, ask them, what complications have you had this year? Because it's what I call, Catherine, I need to know their practice bandwidth. What problem are they willing to, they never want to see? And what result do they always want to see? I need to know that bandwidth. I need to know that bandwidth for my surgeon that I'm listening to for a technique he's doing, or wants me to do. Because if I don't, to cross metaphors, then I'm not getting informed consent. Then I'm not really finding out that, by the way, I forgot to tell you, 20% of my patients have an eyelid ectropion when I do this, but I'm working on it. Well, you tell me that, not doing the procedure. But if you didn't tell me it, I tried Monday morning. So in the same way, the patient needs to get proper informed consent. They need to be told exactly what your practice bandwidth is. These are the aesthetic results. That's my goal. That's what you can expect to happen. And I'm very clear about it. And on the other end, these are things I never want to see. And these are the things I do see. And I say, when you go see another surgeon, I don't care if it's your orthopedic surgeon or if it's another plastic surgeon, ask them that question. So I've had patients come back to me and they say, well, I asked the question. One of the doctors left the room. He got upset at me and left the room. The other one mumbled something that made it obvious, like somebody in court that's not telling the truth. He was uncomfortable, and that was a deal breaker. So I don't think, some are easy, are facile at kind of faking it, but it can come through. And so regardless, it's what I tell my patients. So to answer your question, and then I say, here are the results. You can see them for yourself. You decide. And so I think that, and then I say, when you go around this office, you see everybody. You see how they think, see how they talk, see how they take care of you. You tell me if that's a superior care delivery. It pervades the entire office. Everybody's on the same page in that regard. And so that's the way I can justify, just like you had alluded about Botox. That's a good example.
Tell them about your Botox philosophy. I love that.
Right. So Botox, that follows the same philosophy. It's exactly the same. When I had nurses coming in and doing the Botox, and the premise was, well, you should be in the operating room and you let them do all that, and you can be busy operating. Well, it sounded good until it wasn't, because I'd have my accountant and bookkeeper saying, are you sure you think, this is really a good idea? You're basically supplying them, the people injecting, with a salary. There's very little profit in there because they're chasing the bottom, the lowest common denominator, which is the Groupon pricing. And the numbers keep going down to compete with the little clinics across the street that are in the hair salons. And there's little money to be made. So I decided, after a couple of problems that I had in terms of complications related to a couple of treatments that were done with my nurses, no aspersions against nurses, but it wasn't me that did it. It was somebody else, and my name's on it. So it's me. And I decided I'm going to start doing them again. I tripled my pricing. I wrote a letter to every single patient, and I said the reasons why this is still a surgery of sorts. It's an invasive procedure. It requires technique, knowledge of anatomy, the ability to treat a complication if there was an emergency. There's aesthetics involved that comes with an aesthetic surgeon over anybody else. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm back on board. I'm going to be responsible. And the other thing I do is I give as much as they want, as many times as they want within a period of weeks. So boosts and all that just cost nothing. So therefore they get, as I like to put it, you're going to get your money's worth, but not 1 cc more. You're never going to look done, but you're not going to have an undone. And it's going to give you exactly the right amount by coming back and spending a minute. Let's get it just right. As I like to say, you're going to hit the bell from below. And so by doing so, what happened? Well, despite the fact that I'm doing the cases rather than they are. There was never a problem in terms of the OR because you just do it between cases. You do it whenever.
Right.
They don't take long. So that's an irrelevant data point. Number two, I probably lost 3% of my patients. They all continued to come to me. They did not leave, or if they left, they came back. And then thirdly, and the most important thing is the non-quantifiable, at least I haven't truly quantified, it's hard to quantify, number of patients that because you're in with that patient and you're talking to them about their Botox and about their skin, about their eyelids, and then the next thing you know, they're booking a surgery because they've interacted with you the last 4 months 3 times. That would have been 0 times had they gone to see the nurse. I am getting surgeries because that's legitimate. They've got an opportunity to have a mini consult every time they come see me. So, and I love to be with my patients, and we develop a relationship, and that's worth gold. As you know, ultimately, your best marketing is your own practice. And as you put it, yes, I've got many patients, and it only builds on itself. But it's only as good as your relationships with your patients. And if you develop those kind of relationships that come with every instance you visit them as many times as you possibly can, like I'm obsessed about patients coming back for follow-up. I mean, I will give them boxes of candy to come in or gifts because it matters so much to me to see how they're doing and see how I did. Plus, they come back. They walk in the office. They see something on the wall. We talk again. They see me. They think of something they want. That doesn't come through Instagram. That comes from coming back in the office and seeing me, and that builds. And that's why it takes years. That doesn't happen quickly. That kind of relationship where a patient's going to not come to you just this time and then look for the next best person next time. They don't ever leave. They never leave. It's a home for them. And actually, the more borderline personality they are, I mean that tongue-in-cheek, the more likely they are to never leave because they have a safe space. Get them, we're going to take care of them.
Don't you wonder what's going to happen for solo practitioners? Is it still going to be financially possible to go, hit the ground running with solo? Like, are you going to have to group up all?
It's bye-bye.
Yeah.
Private practice is probably dead. It is in the Bay Area, in any major metropolitan area. It's sad to say that is the case. I think it's still possible. I hope to get somebody into my practice, but it's going to have to be a very special person because I've had, not that I'm quite looking yet, but I've had people come and we've talked, and then they say, well, I got this job at a Kaiser or an equivalent, and I got a salary, and I work 9 to 5, and I don't have to try to look for a patient. Is what I call you're in a game reserve versus being out in the range. And and of course, that's very attractive. And also, there's a mentality and an expectation that that's what's going to come. Anyway, that's what I'm going to be doing. Because I think it's like 75% of all physicians are on salary now. And it's probably even higher for a new doctor. So on the flip side, as I like to tell anybody that's thinking about joining me, but what an opportunity that you can actually be that minority. You always want to be the one that stands out in this business. And you could be the one with your own OR, with a reputation office, an independent facility that doesn't have to answer to some corporate. Think what went on with COVID. You read all about the corporate missteps of PPEs and people getting fired because they don't want their name besmirched because they weren't giving enough PPEs to doctors and nurses. That's where we're going. And it's not a pretty place for quality of care. Don't get me started on that. And so if you can have your own bubble, and you can, as I like to tell my patients, we've got our bubble. I can control everything, horizontal and vertical. It's mine. And you can do that kind of work in that environment, it would be very successful because there'll be even fewer people like me. So I have a modicum of optimism that they will exist. There'll be fewer and far between. And the ones that do survive are going to have to be better. You talk about being better. You can't be average. You'll never survive against people that are in institutions being fed patients, whether they're good or bad. Yeah.
So what kind of mindset are you going to need from 2020 on? Obviously, you've got to have that growth mindset, creativity, thinking outside the box, or thinking in the box and just you're getting a job. Like, is that?
So that's fascinating because when this first happened, Catherine, this COVID, I said to my wife, I don't want the autumnal years of my practice to be, looking like 10,000 leagues under the sea. So if the short answer is, if this goes on a long, long time, I'll just do something else because it's not a lot of fun. No one can say this is fun.
Right.
It's
brutal.
It's fun. And so anybody that says, "Oh yeah, it's good," and we didn't even talk about Zoom calls and consults. They're not. They're not good. They're not better. They're worse. Okay. So anybody that says, "Oh yeah, it's better," I'm getting close with them, and I'm below me. There's nothing like being in person. I mean, how could anybody possibly refute that, especially in our field? Their body language, what they're wearing, just the touch, the just the whole environment, being in my office and seeing the office, my staff. There's no comparison. So Zooming is never going to replace it in terms of the intellectual evaluation of it. But the bottom line is I thought, if this continues, I'll do something else. But in that vein, one, I'm an optimist. I don't think it'll go on for years and years, and hopefully I'm ready to. I'm flexible and nimble. I'll deal with it for now, but I suspect that it won't be interminable. And I love what I do too much, and I've worked too hard to not reap those benefits. But I'm also diversifying. I did that in 2008 when I established a foundation when I could have been doing basket weaving. I needed to do something with my staff. So I started the foundation to do charity reconstructive care, which turned out to be a blessing because now I've got that as a side kind of filler for my OR and keeping my staff busy. They feel entirely empowered. Emotionally, it's an incredible gift.
How fulfilling.
All about doing that. I mean, I was the chair of the board for Operation Access, which was the organization that vets these patients. I got so involved. Just recently stepped down, but I'm going to diversify. I'm working on several things. Why that diversification? One, because I don't know where this is going to take us. Right. We have our, as I was just talking to a chief of a prominent program yesterday, he says he started up as well. And I said, but this is the first wave. These are selected population patients. These are ones that are least fearful. They're already on your books, or they're thinking about coming, whatever the reasons were. Don't get too excited. And it's good that they're coming back, but it's the second one that matters. What's that one going to be like? Because there's a lot of fear in the community. And I think that's going to be the test. Plus, in tandem with that, we've got this COVID going on. And if there's another peak, which could happen, and everything gets shut down again, that's like losing another leg. So I think that it's uncertain right now. There's no question the uncertainty is real, and no matter how optimistic you are, it's uncertain. So just like as I said in 2008, I'm trying to diversify, both because I want other things to do when you got to prepare for retirement. Right. And so I'm working with a malpractice company to become a consultant for them with my checklisting and be able to. It's something I've always wanted to do is finally be able to penetrate the market beyond my aesthetic colleagues, where I've done a good job, and I've had a very hard time getting it into university settings or hospitals. Well, if you go to the doctor's practices where they've got malpractice, and you say you could get a discount in your malpractice if you start practicing more carefully, more safely. Nice. Bingo. So I'm working with them right now, and they're very interested in it, and so that's going to happen. I've also established this learning curve where I'm going to be for education of residents, and we're going to do this meeting, which is going to be, as you just put it, with something else you talked about, like this whole what you're doing now. It's independent of associations and meetings. It's my own meeting. We have full control over it, and obviously it'll be financially worthwhile because it's going to deliver a lot in an unfettered, transparent way, in the way no one else can do it for a multitude of reasons. It can't be done in the mainstream venues, and so I'm going to do. I'm going to start. We didn't talk about it, but I'm going to start some social media, podcasting, and so on, because I do think that's going to feed into everything else I'm doing. It's all one big theme. It's safety and aesthetics. It's my balance between the two, suffused with truth and honesty and integrity. And it all sounds mother and apple pie, but it's real. That's what it is. That's how that's how you succeed. So that diversification is going to be another piece of how I'm going to deal with what's coming. Specifically related to the practice, it requires a lot of communication, right? I'm sending emails out every few weeks to my patients to make sure they're up to date with where we are, what I'm thinking, what the state of the state is, reinforcing the safety commitment we have and based upon a foundation of work and reputation, not just saying I'm going to wash my hands. They know how I feel about all that. That'll continue, but it's going to take, as I was saying to that doctor yesterday, it's going to take a lot of hand holding, a lot of talking, because I had a patient on Friday whose mother was going to come in on Thursday yesterday for a facelift, taking care of the daughter. The mother's coming in to get a consult. We have a protocol where we have the patient call us. They're in their car in the parking lot, and we tell them it's time to come up. The daughter called. The mother, we thought they were coming up. The daughter called back a few minutes later and says she can't come out of the car.
Why?
She can't come out of the car. She's afraid.
Oh.
She's been in shelter in place for 2.5 months, and this was her first time out, and she's afraid to go upstairs.
Oh.
So if you don't take pause and respect that, you're missing the boat in terms of the market. The market is afraid. There are lots of them that are ready and not afraid, but there's a lot that are. Right. And I would say all of them are to some extent for good reason. And so you need to respect that. You need to work on that. It requires a lot of talking, a lot of educating, a lot of hand holding, and a lot of demonstrable evidence that you are with them in terms of what you're doing to protect them. But some of it is impossible. I mean, we're just dealing with something that's hanging over all of us, and you can't make it go away. You can't turn off the light and say it's gone. So there's a limit to what you're going to be able to do, and you have to be careful. You don't want to be crass. You don't want to suddenly sound like an insensitive plastic surgeon that wants to just get you in to do your Botox. It's a dance. It's a very delicate dance, which hopefully will make people better. It should make people better. If there's one thing I tongue-in-cheek say, they're going to be safer now.
Right.
All those guys that weren't as safe, they got to be safer now, because and if they aren't, it could be catastrophic. So the benefit of this is that people are going to up their game, hopefully, when it comes to dealing with something they didn't think a lot about.
For overall, I got the feeling that it made all of us pause. So it's more quality now than quantity. It's just making all of us just stop and think before we act and spend and do all the things we're doing. Yeah, I'd like to wrap it up now, though, because I think we're going long. But how can people learn more about you, especially surgeons who are interested in following your ways, because it's different, and I love it. It's one way, not the only way, but.
So for now, it's my website, drrosenfield.com. I try to put up some blog posts up there for people to see what's happening new in my world. And then they can obviously email me at drrosenfield.com and definitely ask me any questions or get me on. I can get them on my list of where people are interested in what I'm doing. And I'm ultimately, as I alluded, going to plan on doing some platforms with a podcast, both on the professional side and on the consumer side that I'm working on right now, which wouldn't have come without this pause, as you put it. And so that's going to come, and eventually I could share that with you on your website.
Sure.
And but I think your point, one last point when you mentioned about that this gives us pause and people are going to slow down and they're going to be more careful and they're going to about all the prior kind of goals we might have had that were misplaced. I'm more of a realist. As soon as things go back to sort of normal, we know that we're creatures of habit and we're going to the path of least resistance, which is great because I'll be standing out again. Right. I think you got to have legs to this. It can't be something that's for convenience or it's thrust upon you for the moment. And the minute that strain goes away, you go back to your old ways. And I think that's the lesson here. try to hold on to this. Don't let go of it. Whatever you were thinking that's new and better, and you paused and said, wait a minute, I was going down the wrong track. Write them down and put it on your wall. Frame it. Because the likelihood is that as soon as we go back to, so to speak, normal, you'll have forgotten all of them.
Those are beautiful words of wisdom. Thank you, Dr. Rosenfield. And
Pleasure.
thank you, everybody. Please do me a favor. If you got a lot of value out of this, please subscribe to Beauty and the Biz. I'd love a good review if you feel so inclined. And then if you've got any comments or feedback, please give them to me on my website. It's catherinemaley.com. Or you can always DM me at Instagram at Catherine Maley MBA. And with that, we'll have a great day and we'll talk again.
We hope you found valuable insight on this episode of Beauty and the Biz. For more episodes, tools, and Catherine's free book, visit www.catherinemaley.com. That's www.catherinemaley.com. And be sure to subscribe to get the latest practice building strategies delivered to you. And don't forget to share this Beauty and the Biz podcast with your staff and colleagues.